But basically, thank you for those who are on already, and obviously welcome to everybody joining. I'm Joel, and that's Emily.
Yes.
Yeah, hopefully you can hear and see us. Just as we go, just so you know, there is a question section on the right whilst you're in the webinar. We definitely welcome questions today. We want to give you the opportunity to try and answer some of those at the end as well. So, you know, if you have any burning questions as we're going, I think drop them in the chat and we'll see if we can answer them as we go. But I think more importantly, there'll be plenty of time at the end in order to answer questions. So why are we here today? Well, oh, go on, Em.
Sorry, I was just going to say everyone should change their chat bar to all entire audience if they're chatting back, or they can just send it to us as an option as well.
Yeah, that's a good shout. And yeah, if you've got any statements that you think will be pertinent to the webinar as we go as well, please feel free to jump in and put them in, and we'll try and share some of the thoughts. But why are we here today? The main reason being that we get a lot of questions as recruiters as to what's happening in the market right now. Why is it that way? What can I do differently? How are other people acting in the market? So quite simply, that is the purpose for our webinar here today. A lot of the information that you're going to be hearing in here is anecdotal evidence from us and what we do in our day-to-day jobs. We've also got a few bits and bobs of stats externally from our business. But anything else you'd like to add in before we get going?
I think maybe we should just introduce ourselves properly. Do you reckon? I'm sure everyone knows who we are, but from my side, I've been working in the data science and data analytics market for nearly 5 years, and I specialised in the last 2 years in more of the data science field, but it's kind of come in, both in analytics and data science. Whereas Joel, you are?
Yep, been at Precision 11 years and have recruited in every kind of role pretty much within data. More recently, in the last few years, the data engineering and BI space. But yeah, plenty of time in the market, and have seen a lot of different things, and definitely haven't seen a market like this in the 11 years that I've been working. So what we're going to get into today, let's have a look at the contents page. So we've got just some key points from our Q4 reports. We'll compare that to some of the previous reports that we've had over the last few quarters. And then we're going to go into 5 key areas of the frequently asked questions that we get around salaries, skills, businesses that are hiring, how to navigate the current market, and also general economy and immigration questions. I guess the caveat with the economy, we're not economists, but obviously we are aware of some things that are affecting us. And then we'll go to questions to the floor. So here's just some top level information on the Q4 report, Q4 being financial year. So that was from April, May and June of, well, I guess what we called last year. And the general vibe and the general theme that we saw in quarter 4 was one that's been happening for the last few years, really, is we've seen an increase in absolutely everything in terms of salaries, people moving jobs out there, contract rates. And I know you've seen it being extremely busy as well, Emily.
Yeah, it's madness to say the least. And I think it's worth noting that all of our quarter reports have just been increase upon increase upon increase. So these figures and stats here are just those 3 months. I picture the last 3 quarters. It's pretty mental.
100%. So I think a good anecdotal piece of evidence, I was just chatting to a senior data engineer from Melbourne this morning, and he said at the peak of his job search, and even when he's not searching, he received 127 emails on LinkedIn about jobs. 127. I don't even know how, first of all, you manage that many in a week. He said that 25 of them were from the same company, as in different recruiters working on a role within the same company. So I think there's a good piece of information there. If you are a hiring manager or in the talent team, putting a role out to 25 agencies might not be the best approach, but obviously it may be recruiters also working on roles that they haven't necessarily been briefed on. But even without that, you've got 100 other roles that he was approached about in a week. You can't reply to all of that. So I think a key message being, one thing to take out of that anecdote is, if your key strategy for finding candidates for your company is sending in-mail messages on LinkedIn, it's not going to be a successful way of doing things at the moment. And I spoke to another candidate today who turned on LinkedIn Open to Work and updated their profile on the back end of Seek, which obviously meant their phone number was then on the internet. This was also a data engineer, and he's received around 100 calls within 24 hours. So again, if you're looking at your candidate strategy, if that is the side of the webinar that you're most interested in, if your key strategy is to fight against other people for someone coming active on the market, it's going to be a losing battle, because it's so hard to compete against that many other agencies, that many other companies looking for that same person at the moment, which is why you probably see us precision sourcing out there so much on LinkedIn, annoying you all the time with our market updates or our events, or that we're putting on webinars like this, because at the end of the day, the key candidate strategy right now needs to be, is that amazing candidate who's about to hit the market approaching me or us now before they actually put themselves out there open on the market? Any thoughts on that, Em?
Yeah, I was just going to say sort of similar to what you've said, but on the flip side, like you wouldn't go applying for 100 jobs on Seek as a candidate, would you? Same goes for clients. Like you need to be targeted in your approach. So it just speaks to the LinkedIn situation you've just said. It's important to be strategic at the moment, and we'll go on to further.
100%. We had one question already jumped in the question bar. Thanks for that. Has there been an increase in contract length being offered? Do we know the average and or the split between ongoing versus fixed term? I think my key thing I'd say on that, first of all, fixed term seems to be dying a bit of a death at the minute. Would you agree, Emily?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, we probably refuse to work fixed term contracts ourselves, just because you don't usually move in this market anyway unless you've made the right decision and it's a stable role, and you kind of don't want that fixed term with not all the added benefits that a contracted daily rate would come with,
Yeah, exactly. And then also in terms of the length of contract being offered, I'd say that candidates are definitely out there asking for longer term contracts. That's 100% something that's happened. Has that necessarily been reflected in the businesses initially offering 12 months instead of 6? We haven't seen a huge change in that yet. There's definitely been a decrease in those kind of 3 or 4 month contracts though, from what I've seen anyway, if you'd agree, Em.
I agree, yeah, definitely.
Cool. All right, so on to the next slide, which is just a bit of a comparison against some other quarters. So obviously Q4 of 2020 in April and May was when we saw the huge decrease in hiring because of the first COVID lockdown and no one knew what was happening. But what was really interesting from then was in June 2020, we saw a very sudden, okay, this isn't going to be as bad as we thought for the data market and data industry. Roles increased by 20%. And this is the evidence that we were kind of talking about. Really saw the start of the increase in contract rates at the start of the big increase in people changing jobs in Q2 of last year. And we're now August. So we're looking at around 9 or 10 months of continual growth of double figures in rates, in salaries, in people moving jobs, in jobs being out there available on the market. And the other interesting piece from this is if you look on the right there, the data engineer wasn't necessarily the most in demand job title just over a year ago, whereas now I'd say 80% of my time is spent looking for data engineers. It seems to be the key thing that people are looking for.
I would also add to that, Joel, and just say, like, it seems that I think what the data or tech businesses have done in that sort of first, I suppose, kickoff of COVID is like do what everyone did and sort of hold back on hiring. But it really, really like shone through that data is a really, really strong and growing industry still. So everyone's just kicked off massively because obviously they're behind in recruitment, but also it's just a forever growing industry. So you're all in the right industry.
Yeah, 100%. All right, so that was just more of a general snapshot that we wanted to give, but now we're going to get into some of the key questions that we've asked. It's a pretty basic PowerPoint we put together here, so there's not a lot in these points that you need to necessarily be looking at, but these are the most common questions that we're getting in terms of salaries. So basically, what's happening? Why are they so volatile? How do we know what we're worth? Who's paying the most? So we'll try and cover off as many of these as we can. If there's any others that you'd like answering, do drop them in the question and chat bar. But I think the biggest thing for me, the point I'd like to get across is when you are having your head turned, when you are seeing salaries down the road, for 160,000 when you're earning 120,000, it's just to really consider what would that mean for you, not just in the short term, but also the long term, in the sense of, okay, if you do go ahead and get a $160,000 job instead of 120 that you're on now, what will that mean for that role? What is expected of you? What will you need to be delivering? Have you actually got the skills in order to be able to deliver at that level? And more importantly, once the market flattens itself back out and the borders are open again, salaries become a little bit more stable, is that going to leave you on a bit of an island at that salary? And is that going to be something that you need to kind of consider in the long run? Is it necessarily worth taking that really high salary? Or is it worth maybe looking internally with your current company and your current manager and having a chat with them first before you get your head turned? I think that's the thing that we really want to get across, isn't that, Em, in terms of that internal parity and talking internally about salaries and not having it as much of a taboo.
Yeah, and definitely, like, we'll talk about it further down, but like, having conversations earlier is probably the main thing from that I hear. Like, if you're going to talk about salary, don't get 3 interviews into a new job and then use it as a leverage point, you know. So that's a big thing too. But we'll go into further detail, I suppose. Like, yeah, I was also going to say, like, the volatile question, like, you can add to this, Joel, but like, it's so volatile because there's just so much competition. As we've seen the stats, there's so many roles, there's not enough people. It is like the most competitive market I've worked in. I'm sure you could say the same as well. So with that comes, like, I suppose, reactive decision making from both candidates and clients and companies, you know, hiring processes and whatnot. Would you agree?
Yeah, 100%. Very reactive to each individual situation. We're having candidates on a Monday, readily available, keen to interview. By the Wednesday, they're off the market, having been offered $20,000 more than what they'd have expected. And it's not everybody that's having that situation, but it's definitely the common thing that we're hearing. Then on the flip side, we're hearing about, I think there's one candidate that we're working with at the minute, and is accepting an offer, is keen to accept the offer, but has been very open about the fact that they're going to use that offer to then leverage that for more money in the current place that they're in. So I think the volatile market is meaning people are acting differently to how maybe they normally would, which is very difficult. The how do I know what I'm worth question, I think, is one that you answer really well, Em, when we were talking about this earlier.
Yes, I really would say, like, ask the question to everyone, like, ask yourself, can you clearly articulate 2 or 3 key examples of business problems that you've solved using data? Is it understandable to people who aren't technical? Are you staying informed around talent surveys, like webinars like this, quarterly reports, so that you actually do know, okay, cool, I've had these checkpoints, I know what I've delivered, I know this is happening in the market, boom, this is what I'm worth, because you've done them, I suppose you've measured it, right?
Yeah. And that's great practice for when you're then going to an interview and then actually trying to sell your worth. I think the problem that we've got at the minute is so many people are hearing about the amazing salaries out there and they think, oh, my friend down the road is on X, so why am I not on X? At the end of the day, you're probably not doing exactly the same job. And having that mindset as well, it's more of a, I hate the word, but it's more of an entitled, well, if everyone else is getting that, I want that as well, rather than, okay, what am I actually delivering that makes me worth that money, and what skills am I bringing that maybe other people don't have? And if you're asking those questions and you're able to clearly and concisely answer them, that means that you probably are worth that extra money. If you can't, and you're thinking, oh, well, I just want more money because I've been in this job for 6 months, or I want more money because someone else is getting it, it's probably not going to be a positive result for you. And that gets into this when it's too much, right? In terms of who's paying the most, I think we're probably not seeing a huge difference anywhere. I mean, obviously, everyone always says the banks and finance and whatever else it may be, but I wouldn't suggest it's a common theme in that sense. You're finding maybe more digital and e-commerce companies pushing the envelope, Em?
Yeah, I'd say so, but it's pretty much to your point, like, everyone is paying quite a lot more than what they would usually be paying at the moment, just based on the market activity. So yeah, definitely digitally led e-commerce kind of businesses and product-based businesses, I would say, as well.
Brilliant. And then is the budget or the candidate dictating the salary? I mean, the obvious answer is that the candidates are driving that more than they ever have done. But at the end of the day, it does mean that companies, they still do have a budget that they need to work to. You can't suddenly just be offering someone $30,000, $40,000 more if the value in that person coming into the business isn't there. But I think that the broader question really comes to this internal parity piece and how much difficulty that seems to be causing people, especially hiring managers, around how you manage that at the moment.
Yeah, I would add to that and say, like, it's frustrating to hear, but I understand, like, why you need to reference internal parity, but it's almost like it's doing people a disservice at the moment, because like it's kind of a good time to use it as taking stock. I think just like we are in lockdown, COVID, like you kind of need to reflect, as a business, are you paying your current staff enough? Would you rather lose, your best team to competitors due to just a 10, 20 grand increase when you could pay them 10% more and ask them about what they want? And also don't forget like hiring time costs, risk associated with bringing people on board. So I suppose, yeah, that's a big thing that's coming up for us for sure.
Yeah, I think there's three key questions that you need to be asking yourself when going out to market looking for a new person to join your team. And I think the first key question is, what have we done internally with our team to make sure that we're retaining them, and are they being paid the right amount? And I think that's got to be the first question that you ask before anything. And it could even be a case of, we've got a budget of 130,000 to bring someone in. Is it worth us spreading that money out across our current team to make sure that we retain the current knowledge and the best people in our team, rather than bringing in someone new? That would be question one. I obviously can't answer that for people. That has to be an internal question. The second one being, if our current team is earning 130,000 plus super, and I'm going to go to market, and the cheapest candidate I'm going to get at the same skill level as them is 150,000 plus super, am I going to be able to do that? What's that going to look like with my internal optics? So therefore, do I need to bring those salaries up before I go and find someone? Or conversely, do I need to bring someone in at 120 to 130 plus super who is good attitude, able to learn, maybe not quite at the skill level of the current team, but is someone that we can train up? I mean, these are all questions that you need to be asking yourself, all questions that aren't going to be answered in the same way for each company. But I think it's too difficult at the minute to just go, we need to hire someone, let's go and hire someone. It doesn't happen that quickly. And if you haven't answered those three questions, it's probably not the right time to go to market.
I agree. I think you had an example, Joel, of this is probably another point actually, is like having conversations earlier, which we kind of touched on, when you're going into a process for salaries and new roles, or even just your current role, like having those conversations so that they don't come up after 3 interview rounds and then you use it as something to, like, I suppose, leverage for your current company, or people are lowballing you and it just doesn't have a good experience. And make sure, I think we preach about this all the time, but everyone needs to make sure that that's ironed out from the beginning, and there's no surprises.
Yeah, and look, it doesn't necessarily have to be the first conversation you have, but essentially you need it to be done after that first interview. Because, the example was, I had a guy I was working with who'd gone direct to a bank, and he'd gone through 3 interviews, currently on 150 plus super, would have moved for the same, and got through the 3 interviews, and then the offer was put at 130 plus super because that's literally what the budget was, top end. Obviously, going through all that time of interviewing that person, you're looking at 10 to 20 hours total time between different people of going through that process. If they'd have discussed that salary after first interview, it may have been, okay, well, this isn't quite the right role for you. That's fine. There's too much thinking still of, if we get them through the interview process, they're going to want to join us so much that we'll be able to convince them. I mean, at the end of the day, like, it's so few candidates out there at the minute who are willing to move for less money that they're on. Yes, there's candidates willing to move for the same, but I think just save everyone a little bit of time and have that discussion early on. I think it's fair enough. And also be super ready for that candidate after that first discussion who was happy to take 130. Within a week, they might be up to 150 because it's just what's happening in the market. And, we can't necessarily hold it against people, because at the end of the day, if that's the other offers that they're getting, that's what's happening. So we'll move on from salaries. I've seen your question there, Prerit, on the side around advice for a fresh grad trying to land a role, which I think is a really pertinent question. We'll definitely get to that towards the end of the session. So just hold that thought for now. This is probably the biggest thing that I get asked, as well as salaries, is what is in demand. On my side of things, which is slightly different to Emily's, everything's just based around cloud at the moment. Can they work within a cloud environment? Are they able to code in something like a Python or a Java or a Scala? If so, that's a good start. So many companies moving, whether it be to Azure or AWS or whatever it may be. And that then conversely means that's the hardest skill set to find, because that's the most in demand, which I know is slightly different maybe to you, Emily, on your side of things.
Yeah, I would, everyone I speak to, or I suppose working with, always stress the importance of the basic foundational tools. So, like, can you use SQL? It's probably really different to you, but can you use SQL to a decent level? are you able to use a visualization tool of some form, like agnostic in that sense? And then can you use stats and maths to like basically frame up a problem and help understand the business and basically contribute to the business in some way? And that might be recommendations, it might be saving time or money. I think that is the most key sort of maybe 3 points. But then, yeah, it sort of ties into the cloud stuff again, like going into data science, cloud, coding tool, and visualization for me.
Exactly. And then on our side of things, are there any particular courses or accreditations I should be doing? As with every time that this question would come up, I would always say the same answer. In Australia and New Zealand, it always seems to be that commercial experience, on-the-job experience trumps any or most courses or accreditations that you can get. People want to see you having actually used it in practice, which is all very well saying it if you're in a job that isn't using that right now. If you want to help yourself and get yourself that little extra 5-10%, yeah, getting certified in Azure or AWS or GCP or something like that, it's never going to harm you. It's going to hone your skills. Is it going to land you a job? Probably not. But I think as well, if you're showing people that you're interested in self-learning and you are out there doing that, that again is going to make you stand out a little bit in interviews. But again, it's not going to be the be all and end all in terms of getting you a job. Role titles in demand, like I mentioned for me earlier, data engineering is trumping absolutely everything else on our side of things as well. And I know your side is just busier than ever with the data science side, isn't it?
Yeah, like, I mean, data science in general, you could like name any type of title that has data science in it, and that's in demand, but also data insights. So senior data insights analyst is also huge at the moment. I think that's because it's that like whole communication and bridging between the business and technical and all that stuff as well. But yeah, those are the main ones.
So Pradeep's asked a question which is pertinent to now. I'll quickly answer. How much does relevant certifications add up to your job application? Which is a great question. Look, as I said, it's hard to put a quantifiable number on it. It might give you that 5% edge if it's down to, should I take this candidate over that candidate? Will it completely change your outlook on how people view you in the market if you haven't used it in a commercial sense? Probably not. I think I've only ever worked with one client who said we needed certification, and it was I think it was one of the Azure certifications, Data Vault, and that's because they were working on very specific projects that pretty much mirrored that Data Vault certification. So in that case, that really helped. But generally, it's more of a willingness to show that you're up to self-learning, that you're doing it yourself, and it might just give you that edge. But if you're currently an SQL developer and you get certified in AWS, to go from an SQL developer to then getting a role where you're an AWS engineer, for example, just because you've got the accreditation, it's very rare that we hear that that's going to be enough to land you something. So hopefully that answers your question, Pradeep. If not, we can come back to that towards the end. Cool. All right, next. So who's hiring? What about your side of things then? We'll start with you.
A simple answer is everyone is hiring. Like I've said it already, but digitally led companies are massively growing and adding to the team. It's not like backfills or anything, it's literally growth. So yeah, what about you?
Yeah, same, absolutely everybody. Like we said, it's a great market to be in right now. I'd love to say it's the banks as always hoovering everybody up, but it's not. It's what we've got a problem with immigration right now is no one coming in the country, and over 1 million people have left the country. So that's a big chunk. Is the fact that all the companies that would maybe usually bring people over from overseas, the large consultancies, the likes of TCS, Wipro, they're not able to bring big squads of people over. And that just quite simply means that they're now out there trying to fight for the same people as everybody else. So it is just a case of that the demand is outstripping the supply right now, which I guess again leads into, if we're going to take one thing away from today's webinar, is are you hiring on attitude first over anything else right now if you are a hiring manager? Because you could be sitting there on an urgent role open for 6 months, which could have been 6 months training up someone a little bit more junior with a really good attitude who would then be able to be up and running. And in fact, some of our clients have started doing that. We've had open requisitions for technical leads, data engineering for a long time with a number of businesses, and they've started to now just go, well, you know what, our mid-level engineers that we hired a year ago are now at that level, so we might as well just start getting more people in who've got the right attitude, are willing to learn. And a lot of the feedback that we're getting from some of our clients at the moment is, oh, they're really good, they're an 8 out of 10, but they just haven't got this one bit of technical knowledge, or they just aren't able to just quite do this that we'd like them to. It's like, well, in 4 to 6 weeks, if they're the right person, right attitude, would that actually be something that they can pick up? And I think that's the big debate that a lot of hiring managers are struggling with at the moment.
Yeah, it's just, I think on that note, it's about like changing the mindset. Just like the reason we're having this webinar is because the market's changed. Like you can't have the same recipe, now. And also, just before I forget, on that note, when you are interviewing or businesses are interviewing and then hiring candidates or not hiring, I think it's really, really key to being able to give specifics around the why. Like, don't feel like you kind of have to just leave it as a candidate and say, oh, okay, that wasn't quite the right role, don't know why. Like, push for feedback, because that will help your development. Same goes for the other side. Businesses that are hiring need to be able to give specifics around the why, and not just, they didn't have the skill when we knew that at the start.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. So I just got off there. One thing to think about, put yourself as if you were the candidate. I think if you're a hiring manager, make yourself that candidate, because one of the funniest things that we find in recruitment is every single candidate and every single hiring manager who's ever been a candidate, we sit down with them, okay, what are you looking for? Tell me a bit about yourself. And they say X, Y, Z, I'm really good at all these things. I don't code in X and I haven't used Y, but give me 4 to 6 weeks learning and I'll be able to pick it up, no problem. And yeah, we agree. We think that's very true. Put that person, same person, in the hiring manager position, and they turn around and go, they just haven't quite got enough Python knowledge that we'd be expecting. And I'm thinking in my head, well, 6 months ago, you were telling me it would take a really good person only 4 to 6 weeks to pick up these things. And that just doesn't marry up. It's just weird to me. And also the fact that put yourself as that candidate, if you're then turning around to that candidate going, you know what, you're an 8 out of 10 match, but you just haven't got why, and we need that. Are you giving them enough detailed feedback so that they're walking away going, yeah, that's fair enough, I completely agree, and I'm going to go away and learn that? The type of feedback people are giving at the minute needs to be nice and detailed. And I think if you're coming out of an interview going, I'm just not sure if this person is quite good enough in this area, think about whether in that interview you've actually given them the chance to really answer that question. So the more honesty, this is going to lead into what we're saying here, the more honesty we can have in the current hiring market, the better. Because if you can take the last 10 minutes of that interview to say, hey, I've really enjoyed chatting with you today. These are the points that you did really well on and I'm really excited about. There's just a couple of things I wasn't sure about when we were chatting today. Is there anything else that you'd like to add or any more clarity that you'd like to give me around that? So rather than you walking out of that interview going, yeah, I'm not quite sure if they were good at that, you're actually nailing on, right, you know what, I've given them a second chance, they're still not good enough, or I've given them a second chance and they just didn't maybe answer the question perfectly first time around. I think the more we can be doing that, the better, which is very much leading into this open and honest communication. I'll just quickly mention as well, Emily, we've had another Joel come in with saying, yeah, he agrees with the facts that we're saying about the current volatility. And, he's asked hypothetically, if the borders don't open, do we predict demand just rising and rates to just keep increasing? In short, Joel, yes. If nothing changes, and I don't think anything will change over the next 6 to 12 months, I think this is going to continue. Would you agree, Em?
Yeah, I agree. I think it just highlights how important it is to basically the experience that you go through hiring, whether or not you hire that person or whether or not you take the role. Your reputation is key because it is such a small market, and it's so small and tight at the moment that it's just going to keep increasing. I've also go ahead.
No, I was going to say, let's talk about honest, open communication throughout the processes.
Yeah, before we go into that, I just thought I'd highlight, I think we've missed one thing on businesses that are hiring about how we spot out good companies. I just wanted to reference that and say, I think we talked about it earlier, Joel, but I suppose ask the questions to yourself, or maybe do the research around how the company dealt with COVID, and then ask these questions, which are really key, I suppose, for interview processes. Is data part of your C-level conversation or their C-level conversations? How is it used within the business? A lot of those questions are really key at the moment, especially for making the right move. especially in this like uncertain environment. Would you agree?
Yeah, 100%. It's basically a question: how much do you value what the data team does within the business, right? Because at the end of the day, that's the team that you're going to be moving into. So yeah, I'd definitely be asking those three key questions in every single interview that people are attending at the moment. I think it'll give you a really good snapshot of, I guess, how that company views what you're going to be doing moving forward, quite simply. All right, on to open and honest communication, and we'll talk about the grass not necessarily always being greener, but I'll let you kick this one off, Em.
Sure. Look, I think it says at the top line, like honest communication. It is absolutely 100% key at the moment. I think from a client perspective, like, and you can add to this, Joel, the ability to maybe not be too, I use this lightly, like precious when it comes to people interviewing at other places. Like understanding where you stand in the market against others you're competing for and against talent is key, and then being able to say, okay, cool, what can I do differently, what can I add to this, or what can I give this person that potentially they aren't giving you. It's kind of like what we would do when we're talking to candidates and asking them about their drivers, and same goes for a client who's hiring, right?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, imagine like the power, if you're the hiring manager who's asking the questions, it's fine, where else are you interviewing? We'd love to know where we stand. I mean, I ask it every single person that I interview for precision sourcing. I'm like, who else are you interviewing with? Where are you up to? I've even given them advice on saying, yeah, they sound like amazing companies, whatever it may be. But you've then got that opportunity to go, right, we're second at the minute, but I really want this candidate. How do we become the first choice? And you can start talking to them about those questions. What would make us your first choice? What else do you need to know about from us in order to be able to actually come aboard with us? So I think if you're able to have that open conversation with people, it's going to give you a much better chance of actually finding the right candidate that you want and not letting them slip through your fingers. It's also going to let you know where they're up to with other processes. If you know they've got 3 final interviews on Friday, it's currently Tuesday and you're only at first stage and there's a tech test to do. If you really want that candidate, is that tech test the right thing to do? Probably not. Is there another way that you can navigate around it? And then conversely, if you are a candidate, there's no harm in being honest with clients and saying, and the hiring managers and saying, hey, I've got this down the road. It looks really interesting. Some of the salaries that they're talking to me about are X, Y, Z. I just wanted to be open about that. The more we can be honest with each other at the moment, the better. And look, it's never going to be perfect. There's still going to be slip ups, and there's still going to be companies out there who do one interview and offer on the spot, and it makes you think maybe that candidate wasn't being honest with you. But at the end of the day, that honest, open communication is going to set you apart and give you the best chance of both landing the job you want and also getting the candidate that you want. I think it's really important. Counter offers, our favorite thing is recruiters. Are they a good bargaining chip?
No, I feel like I don't want to say the stat because we're probably talking to a lot of analysts here, but I think it's like, what, 53% of people who get counter offers leave after the 6 to 12 month period after they've accepted it or something anyway. Is that right?
Yeah, it's within 6 months, yeah.
Within 6 months, yeah. So I suppose the short answer is like, no, you shouldn't be using them as a bargaining chip. Like, you should be, we've already said this from the start, but having those conversations earlier. Don't use exploring interviews and jobs for an opportunity to get an increase. Like, people are time poor and desperate for talent, particularly now. So like, rather, I suppose maybe think about time then, in this sense, like, you've got to have, people have time, but they don't have time to do this and then get through the process and then actually realize that you just use it as a tool. So yeah, have it earlier, basically, the conversation.
I agree. I know it's difficult, and these are conversations that are very hard to have, especially if the relationship with the manager isn't 100% perfect. But I think back to myself, 2 years in recruitment at Precision Sourcing, I wasn't sure it was for me. And I happily sat down in front of Simon and Jill and said, hey, look, I'm struggling with this. I'm not sure that this job's for me. I'm thinking about looking X, Y, Z down the road. And we had that open conversation about it. And look at me now. I mean, obviously 11 years later, still in the same business. So that made me realize that I'm working for some really great managers, leaders who are able to have that conversation with me. It's kind of a question you might want to ask yourself. If you're not able to sit down with your current leader and say, hey, I wouldn't mind looking at my salary. I think I'm adding this value. It's probably the manager or your boss is the reason that you're leaving. So them giving you $20,000 more once you've got another offer, it's not actually the money that was necessarily the biggest issue. It's the environment that you're working within. You're maybe not able to have those career chats with your leaders. So I would highly recommend to anyone who's thinking that the grass is greener to always try and fix where you are first. If you've already done that, fair enough, the grass might be greener, but it's going to be so easy to hear about all these amazing jobs out there on the market when in reality you might already be somewhere that's pretty good. So you've really got to weigh that up as well. I think maybe let's just quickly hit remote work, which is maybe not catching up as quickly as some people are expecting them.
Yeah, I'd say like it's taking longer to hold in this market, but it is becoming more common. I think there's no real like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but there's no real remote from the start kind of conversations happening when you've like joined a business and immediately you work remotely. It's very rare, but it is increasing, and I think moving into a new business, they kind of expect you to be, you know, in that state or in that city for the first 3 months because it's to your benefit to understand the business and be part of that team, and potentially outside of lockdown being in the office a couple of days to help, because we've just onboarded someone at Precision and Data, right, and that's been a real challenge, is being like away from the office and from not being next to one another. So it's a real advantage to learning and growing with a business that you start with.
Yeah, 100%. I think contract work probably a little bit more prevalent, where we're seeing some remote. Permanent, it's still a bit of hesitation. If we can get someone who isn't fully remote, it would be our preferred, is the message that we're getting a lot of the time. So it's happening, it's coming, but yeah, like you said, Em, it's not fully taken hold where every business with every job will go, yeah, it's fine, we'll look at someone remotely, no problem. I don't think that's quite there yet. Also, in terms of the types of roles that we're seeing out there as well, navigating the current market, the majority, the bulk of the roles, and this speaks to both graduates and more senior candidates, the bulk of our positions are kind of between that 100, 110 plus super to about 160 to 170 plus super. People need what we would call doers. They need those mid to senior level engineers or analysts to actually get the work done. So if you're sitting here as a grad or a senior candidate going, well, I'm not quite seeing the market the same way, it is very much that bulky middle bit that are seeing the huge volatility. Because at the end of the day, at the senior end of the market, there are usually more people willing to look at a new opportunity. And also with grads, obviously, there's always going to be that constant flow of grads coming into the market. Have you all seen the same as well, Em?
Yeah, definitely. I think you've hit the nail on the head with that one.
Great. All right.
I was just going to make sure we've just quickly the tools and resources. I think like, it's probably straightforward, but like use us to bounce ideas off. Like I know we both talked about this before jumping on, but like we're both happy to, if we're not even representing you, to talk to you about what offers you've got, or you know, if you've got this, why are you thinking going that way, or you're not quite sure, like weighing things up. We can be a tool. And then obviously you being on here at the moment is a tool. So yeah, basically using us,
Definitely.
using those surveys, etc. Anything else you can add?
Yeah, the nice thing about the job that we do, especially in the data recruitment market, I know it's not perfect, but compared to when I started it 11 years ago, the types of personalities doing it, the types of people who are in it seem to have changed, and I hope that we're part of that change as well, where people are much more willing to give advice, offer help. It's not as competitive anymore. We speak to our competitors and we say, hey, how are you finding the market? We try and get aligned in terms of what they're finding, struggles with trying to find candidates. There are recruiters out there who will be willing to help, even if you're a client and you think, oh, I've got to go to market, I haven't got budget for a recruiter, but I just don't know if I'm pitching at the right level in terms of salaries. We're always happy to help. So just give us a shout, I think is the main thing more than anything. This is a bit we're not experts on. We've spoken to quite a few of these points already. Around the economy, over 1 million people have left the country. Unemployment is lower than it's been in a long time. There isn't the there isn't the supply of people here locally. So the question we get a lot is, will the market crash? I don't know. I think it will stabilize. Things will change as the pandemic lifts, but I think we're going to be in this kind of crazy world for at least another 12 months.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I was going to say, like, I've said it already, like everyone in this is already in the right industry or career or whatever you want to call it, because I think it's not going to be a mad crash, but yeah, like you say, it will flatten out at some point, but 100%. You never know.
You never know. The long-term impact will just be our salaries going to stay up that high level that they were. Again, probably they'll stabilize, I would suggest. And then coming into that's the main kind of common questions that we get. Just before everybody leaves, those who are left in here, thank you for staying with us this whole time. We've got Prerit's question in the chat bar of what would be your advice for a fresh graduate struggling to land a job. I'm going to give my advice now, but if anyone else has advice they'd like to share with Prerit, who's done well sticking through this webinar, around what he should be doing as a fresh graduate, then please do put some statements into the chat bar. Whilst we're there, Prerit, the advice that I always suggest with graduates is, unfortunately, us as recruiters aren't often the best outlet for you in terms of actually finding your job, because the majority of companies that we work with would have their own graduate schemes and do their own graduate hiring, which means that you've got to be more active than anyone in terms of getting yourself out there on LinkedIn, connecting with the companies and the people who work at the companies that you're interested in. Unfortunately, it is a numbers game at the graduate level, is what we find. You might connect in with 20 people on LinkedIn, send 20 messages to say hello and ask for advice, and only one will come back. But my suggestion in that sense, if you are targeting people that you're interested in working with, to go to them with specific questions rather than just, hey, I'm a grad looking for a job. Get in there saying, hey, as a graduate, what would I need to do in order to land a job within your business? Is there any advice that you could give me? I think if you're asking questions like that to people in the companies that you're targeting, that's always going to stand you in good stead. Do you have any other particular advice, Emily?
Yeah, I suppose I'm trying to think of how I can phrase this. Basically, I'm sure everyone gets, massive amounts of bulk emails and stuff. Recruiters do, like you all will when you're getting, when you're on the market and you're in data specifically as well, because it's so talent short. But how many, ask yourself how many of those you reply to that are very generic. So on the other side of the coin, if you're approaching people and you're approaching businesses, do your due diligence, do your research, and don't just say, hi, I've got this CV here, please consider me. I think it's really important to make yourself stand out. So yeah, do your research and put that into the message, I suppose.
Yeah, 100%. Anything that you can do in terms of projects yourself, any friends or family that you've got where you can actually put your skills into live action is something that I've always said to grads as well. Maybe your friend's friend owns a cafe. Can you get their sales data for the last 10 to 12 months and do some analysis on that you can turn into a project that you can actually turn into something that looks like an internship? I think if you can do stuff like that, that's always going to help you as well. But look, Prerit, if you'd like some more advice specifically as well, flick us a note after this and we can have another chat. We've got a couple of questions here. We've got Pratik, how open or restrictive are companies to candidates from a different industry? On my side of things, Emily, apart from certain finance for banking roles, I'd say that everybody's open to it these days, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I was just going to say it's actually a lot better. I feel like it's been worse in the first couple of years of my experience in recruitment. Now it's just gone way more. I suppose the net's cast further and wider, which is great, because I think that's not the key thing for recruitment 100%. In this area.
Yeah, I think just with certain banking roles, they're like, oh, if you don't know all the different terms and acronyms, it just becomes a little bit more difficult. Outside of that, data's data, right? Let's be honest. People are open to cross industry candidates for sure.
Yeah, I was also going to add on that and say, if you're in, it might be something like, I don't know, you're looking at a stocks or trading firm, but you have absolutely no experience in that firm or that area, but you are passionate about it and you might have done some really cool stuff in your own time. Making that known is key as well.
Definitely. Shubham, does the turnaround time for the application process, is it less now? On average, yes, it is much less. We're finding companies are much more willing to move quickly. Are there still some lagging behind and a little bit slow? Of course, as with anything. My honest feedback right now is if you're in an interview process and you've maybe done the first interview and it feels like it's slowing down, it's probably because something's changed or they've met someone else that they prefer. It's just a shame that maybe that you haven't got that feedback yet. If all the hiring managers that we're working with right now, when they're finding the candidate that they like, they're moving super quick and they're getting them locked in. So yes, to shorter processes. And yeah, go on then.
Oh, I was just going to say, I've just pulled up some stats from our reporting tool, Cube19. And for me personally, it's probably similar to you as well, average time to fill a perm job at the moment is 12 days. So that's unheard of. It used to be, maybe 2 to 3 weeks, 4 weeks even, sometimes 5.
I remember a market back in about 2013, 14 when it was about 12 weeks. So yeah, yeah, super quick compared to normal right now. And contract could be literally application sent Monday, interview Tuesday, contract in hand Tuesday night at the moment. Which has been interesting. Another question from Joel, which is a good one. He's finding more common roles these days are more of a hybrid mix. Say, for example, a product owner with a mix of technical data analysts. How popular do you see this trend materializing in the future, that of hybrid roles? I think one day soon we'll see what we'll call a full stack engineer or full stack data scientist. In that it's a data scientist who can do a little bit of data engineering or vice versa. I think that's something that we're seeing a little bit of. I think there's other hybrid roles around technical analysts expected to be a bit of a business analyst and expected to be a bit of a stakeholder manager and a project manager. My thought is usually those roles are harder to fill because people usually land one side or the other. I think it will become more common. Will they be easy to fill? Probably not. What do you reckon, Em?
Yeah, it's hard. It's a hard one because you don't really want to brand a role as a hybrid role. Like for skill wise, you kind of want someone to come in and then you'd be like, oh, cool, they can do this, this, and this. Do you know what I mean? Like making it, I suppose, a massive checklist to fit. Like it would be a nice to have if that person had it. But yeah, I'm seeing a lot of data science roles having like a light component, and I think that's quite good. A light component of engineering, so you can kind of have the end to end.
Yeah, if you can understand both sides, it makes it easier to interact with people doing that job. I think at the end of the day, most people are still going to be specialists and most jobs are still going to be more specialist. And I think sometimes the hybrid role can be because, oh, we need two people, but we can only afford one. And that's not always a good way to go about your hiring approach. But yeah, I think like with anything, if I look compared to 10 years ago, 11 years ago when I started it, the types of roles that are in the market now compared to then, there's so many new roles and different roles. So I think it will keep happening. I've got one final one for Pradeep. For data roles, it being a vast field, there are various stages, processes, and tools. Would you recommend a candidate to be a generalist or a specialist? And I'm going to say it depends, which is not an answer that's ideal, but look, there's the stock standard skill set that's going to get you jobs, right? And from my side of things, if you know Microsoft tools through and through, you're basically hitting 60 to 70% of the market that you'll be viable to hire in terms of skill set. If I look at GCP, you know, there's obviously a smaller amount of companies that use something like a GCP, which means you're always going to be on the radar of those businesses and always appealing to them, but you're going to be limiting yourself to that smaller pool of companies. I have no opinion one way or the other which is better because I've seen both work. Do you have an idea, Em?
I don't know. I've noticed that a lot of people don't want specialists. Recently, anyway, they want more of a generalist. But yeah, at peaks and troughs, it's really hard to say a blanket answer.
Yeah, basically it comes down to, are you good at what you do? I think more than anything, if you're good at what you do, you're going to get yourself a job. Well, that looks like it at the minute. Obviously, if anyone's got any last minute ones, drop them in there. But otherwise, thank you very much for joining us today. This will be recorded and obviously we'll send it around. Anything else that you'd like to add, Em, before we sign off?
No, I think maybe we can send a survey around after this as well and just see what else. Oh, we've got another question, by the way, before I go on to that.
And then what are the top?
What are the two top skills for a data engineer you find right now? You can answer that.
Yeah, so one would be building pipelines. So I guess obviously advanced ETL really, but building those pipelines would be the key thing that most people seem to be asking for. And then someone who can code as well. So I think sometimes a more traditional BI background doesn't necessarily lend itself to someone who's been heavy in programming and as a developer. I think you really do need to be able to code and program as well if you're going to be a good data engineer, alongside them being able to build those data pipelines. There's so much new stuff popping up in data engineering, especially around batch processing and streaming and whatever else. And it can be easy to kind of get your head turned by all that really fancy new stuff. But I think at the basic core level, you can build data pipelines and you can program and code, you're going to be setting yourself off on a really good start and path.